Tonight, we're heading into some of Canada's small, forgotten towns, places that look quiet on the outside, but hide truths that are hard to believe. Tonight, we bring you 3 true horror stories, real events that people experience themselves. For privacy reasons, names and locations have been changed, but the events happened exactly as described. These are real cases authorities couldn't explain, files that remain open to this day. If you're new here, subscribe to Cryptic Lore for daily true horror stories. Now, let's begin. My name is Elias, and I've worked at Roland's Hardware on Harper Street in the city of Redbridge for 11 years. Every morning, without fail, I showed up at the store at 6 a.m., turned the key in the lock, and reset the alarm system before anyone else arrived. I knew that building down to its bones. I knew which shelves collected the most dust, which floorboards groaned under the slightest weight, which corner of the storage room always smelled like rust and old timber. My routine never changed. My life was predictable, and honestly, I liked it that way. But in the autumn of 2019, something shifted. A man started coming into the store. His name was Martin Hale, and he owned an antique shop about 3 blocks east on Portwell Avenue. I knew Martin from around the area. Late 60s, always dressed in perfectly tailored blazers despite the brutal northern cold, and he'd lived in Redbridge for something like 23 years. Every Wednesday, without exception, Martin would step into Roland's Hardware and buy the same things: vintage hinges, old brass locks, iron chains, restoration supplies. His purchases were always exact, always purposeful. He would lift each item into the fluorescent light, touching the metal with those worn, careful fingers of his, as if he were reading something only he could understand. By early October, I started noticing a pattern. His items were getting darker in nature, more intense. He began asking for things built for containment and security: heavy chains, out-of-production padlocks, iron bolts from the 1920s salvage bin. When I casually asked what project he was working on, he gave me a thin smile and said nothing. He just paid in cash and carried the bags out, pressed tight to his chest. That same month, I attended a marketing conference at the Redbridge Community Center. My coworker Jenna was there too. During lunch, we sat together in the cafeteria, and she mentioned her cousin had been missing for 3 weeks. Her cousin's name was Lena Morris, and she lived alone in a basement apartment near Northwood University. She had simply disappeared. No note, no explanation. The police found the apartment locked from the inside. Her car was still in the lot. Her phone was on the bed, battery totally dead. The case went cold almost immediately. I felt uneasy hearing about Lena, but I didn't connect anything to Martin Hale until late November. I was organizing the salvage section at Roland's Hardware when a customer mentioned a news story. A woman named Rachel Tan had gone missing from her home on Granger Street. Rachel lived alone, 42 years old, a dental hygienist. She didn't show up for work one Monday, and when police checked her apartment, they found everything untouched: dishes unwashed, a coffee mug half full on the counter, cold as stone. She was just gone. 2 weeks later, another disappearance hit the news. Daniel Hurst, a 48-year-old accountant, vanished from his house on Wellington Court. His wife had been out of town visiting her mother. Daniel called her on Sunday night, said he was going to watch the game and head to bed early. She came home Wednesday to find him missing. Wallet on the nightstand, keys by the door, car still in the garage. It was as if he had stepped out of existence. I became obsessed. I clipped every article, watched every local broadcast. By December, 5 people had disappeared from Redbridge. All lived alone. All were reported missing by people outside their households. All left their homes in a state that suggested they had just stepped outside for a moment and never returned. The police held press conferences, floating theories about runaways and voluntary disappearances. No evidence of foul play, they said. No forced entry. No prints that didn't belong. Then, the 3rd week of December, Martin Hale walked back into the store. I watched him go straight to the salvage section. He picked up a mirror that had been in stock since 1987, an ornate piece with a carved frame full of twisted faces and reaching hands. The glass was spotty and warped. Martin studied it, then asked if we had anything older, something with more history, something predating 1900. I went to the storage room and brought out an old mirror from a Victorian estate torn down in 1986. It was heavier, framed in dark mahogany. The glass was rippled and distorted, shifting in the light in ways that made my eyes water if I stared too long. Martin studied this mirror for nearly 10 minutes in silence. Then he bought it without asking for a discount. I helped carry it out to his car. As he strapped it into the back seat of his old Blackwell Continental, I noticed something in the trunk. Furniture, a bed frame, a dresser, pieces that looked valuable, but also strangely lived in. Martin caught me staring. He closed the trunk slowly, thanked me in a flat voice, and drove away. I stood there in the freezing wind, feeling something tighten in my gut. That night, after closing the shop at 6, I walked past Martin's antique store on Portwell Avenue. The building was old, dating back to around 1912. The window display was arranged with furniture and small curios, but nothing had changed in the 3 months I'd been watching him. Same chairs, same lamps, same paintings. Not a single item had moved. I cupped my hands against the glass. The store was dark, except for a small lamp glowing in the back corner near a desk and chair beneath a portrait of someone I didn't recognize. Cabinets lined the walls, filled with items I couldn't make out. On the floor, mostly hidden beneath an ornate rug, was what looked like a trapdoor. My obsession grew teeth. I began digging into Martin's history. I combed through property records at the library. I learned he purchased the building in 1996. Before that, it sat empty for 7 years. Before the vacancy, it had been a storage facility. Before that, a photography studio. Before that, a residence. Records went back to 1889. The building had passed through countless hands, but one detail stuck out. Between 1923 and 1947, the building was owned by Dr. Edwin Whitlow, a physician and researcher who kept a private practice in the basement. The records never made clear what he treated or studied, but local papers referenced vague work involving the mentally ill and the criminally deviant. I didn't go to the police. I knew they'd dismiss every thought I had as coincidence. So I kept watching. I followed Martin on his Wednesday trips. Eventually, he stopped relying solely on Roland's hardware. He visited salvage yards, estate auctions, demolition sites, but he always bought the same kinds of things, objects designed for restraining and securing. Then came early January. On a Thursday night, I decided I couldn't just wonder anymore. I told my supervisor I needed a personal day on Friday. I called in sick. Instead, I parked a block from Martin Hale's shop and waited. Around 11 p.m., Martin arrived. He parked in the alley behind the building and unloaded several items, a mirror, a vanity table, and furnishings I couldn't identify. He carried them inside through a rear entrance. I waited 2 hours. Lights flickered on in the basement windows. I saw shadows moving, heard hammering, dragging, and something that sounded like voices, muffled, impossible to understand. At 1:30 a.m., Martin came back out, locked the door, and drove away. I walked to the rear entrance. The door was secured with a new deadbolt, but one basement window was cracked open just enough. I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but I needed to understand. I pressed my face to the glass. What I saw will never leave me. The basement had been sectioned into separate rooms with freshly built walls. Each room had a bed. Each bed had restraints. The walls were covered in photographs of the missing: Lena Morris, Rachel Tan, Daniel Hurst, and 2 others from the news. The photos were arranged in a timeline. Some showed the victims smiling. Others showed them terrified. The most recent ones showed them restrained in the beds, still alive. I bolted. I drove straight to the Redbridge Police Department and told them everything. Every detail, every theory, every moment of suspicion. The officer listened carefully and told me they would investigate. They told me not to leave town, not to contact Martin, not to go near him again. At dawn, police executed a search warrant on the antique shop. The news confirmed everything over the next few days. The basement was exactly as I described. They found the photographs, they found the restraints and the tools. They found journals going back 23 years, documenting each victim. They found 5 bodies in advanced decay, and they found 3 of the missing still alive, held between 3 and 8 months. They'd been fed, kept alive, tortured. Martin Hale was arrested and charged with 5 counts of murder and 3 counts of kidnapping. The investigation widened. Police found that at least 7 other disappearances over the last 2 decades matched Martin's methods. The cold cases were reopened. Forensic teams excavated beneath the antique shop. They found human remains dating back to the 1920s. 32 individuals buried over nearly a century. The property seemed cursed. Generation after generation, the building drew in people with violent fixations. Martin was just the latest. I quit Roland's Hardware. I couldn't step back inside after seeing that basement. I couldn't look at the chains, the locks, the tools without thinking of those photographs. I moved to a different province, changed careers. I try not to think about that place. But every Wednesday night, I lie awake. Every Wednesday, I wonder if I missed something. If there were rooms I didn't see. If the building that held so much suffering has found someone new, someone who understands what lurks beneath its soil. Police reports say Martin Hale is serving a life sentence with no parole for 50 years. But I still get strange packages in the mail. No return address, old photographs, photos of my house from angles I don't recognize. Photos of me inside my own home. And always in the corner of each image, there's a shape, a shadow, a figure that looks exactly like the portrait I saw hanging in Martin's shop. The portrait of someone I didn't know then, but I know him now. My name is Elena, and I moved to Ravenshore in Northern Ontario during the spring of 2017. I had just finalized my divorce. My husband had been unfaithful, and the previous 18 months had been spent ensuring the legal proceedings concluded with as little emotional damage to me as possible. I was 34, and it felt as though my life had been reset. I needed a place where no one knew me. I needed distance from the city where I had built a life with someone who had betrayed me. I applied for a position as a middle school English teacher at Ravenshore Secondary, and I was offered the role within 2 weeks of my interview. Ravenshore sits on the northern shore of a lake that shares its name. The town's population hovers around 2,000. Logging had once been the main industry, but over the past 2 decades, operations had dwindled. The town had tried to reinvent itself as a tourist destination, leaning on the natural beauty of the lake and the surrounding boreal forest. Vacation homes had been built along the shore, and a small marina operated during summer months. Still, tourism remained inconsistent, seasonal. Permanent residents seemed to exist in quiet resignation, accepting that the town's best days were behind it. My apartment was on Maple Avenue, 3 blocks from the school. The landlord, a woman named Lydia Harper, rented me a second-floor unit in a converted Victorian house. The apartment was small, but clean. Large windows overlooked the street, and in the distance, the water of Raven Lake. I moved in on June 1st. By the end of the week, I had arranged my furniture, organized my classroom materials, and settled into a routine. On my second Saturday in Ravenshore, I attended a community gathering at the town library. It was a casual event to welcome new residents. I met other teachers, town council members, local business owners. People were polite, but reserved. They asked about my background and where I had come from, but no one pressed for details. I mentioned my divorce only in passing, and the subject quickly shifted. What struck me most was how people reacted when I mentioned my apartment overlooking the lake. Their expressions shifted, eyes narrowing, just slightly. Polite congratulations, with an undertone I couldn't quite identify. One woman, Marjorie, approached me after the event ended. She appeared to be in her 60s with gray hair and kind eyes, though worry lingered behind them. She said she had lived in Ravenshore her whole life. She complimented my apartment and said I would enjoy the view. Then, almost casually, she added a warning I initially dismissed as small-town superstition. She told me to be careful near the lake at night. There were things the town had learned to accept, she said. I shouldn't go to the water after sunset. When I asked for clarification, she smiled sadly and said some mysteries were better left undiscovered. I attributed Marjorie's warning to local folklore. I had read about the indigenous history of Northern Ontario and understood that the land carried deep stories and traumas absorbed into the landscape. I was willing to accept that the lake held cultural significance I, as an outsider, didn't fully grasp, but I wasn't about to let superstition keep me from enjoying the natural beauty of my new home. That summer was idyllic. I settled into teaching, prepared my curriculum, and organized my classroom during the quiet weeks before school began. I made friends among the faculty and began to understand the rhythms of the town. In the evenings, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset over the lake. The water shifted from amber to rose to deep purple as the light faded. The sunsets were almost painfully beautiful. Yet I noticed something peculiar about my neighbors. In the Victorian house, I had 3 nearby neighbors. To my left was Mrs. Lynn, a nurse at the regional hospital, pleasant enough, though we rarely spoke. Below me lived George, a retired accountant who kept to himself. Both of them, without exception, locked their windows as soon as the sun set, drew their curtains, and turned on every light. This ritual repeated nightly, and while I found it curious, I didn't question it. School began in September. I taught 8th grade English to roughly 90 students across 5 classes. They were typical for their age, surly, resistant to reading assignments. But I noticed something unusual in their reactions. During lessons on Indigenous culture and history, several students grew visibly uncomfortable. When readings involved lakes or bodies of water, they asked to select alternative assignments. One girl, Clara, even became physically ill during a discussion of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem, Song of Hiowa, which referenced the Great Lakes. I began asking questions directly. Why were they so uneasy discussing water? Was there something specific to Ravenshore I should know? At first, they refused to answer, exchanging uneasy glances. Gradually, they shared a chilling secret: the Walking Ones. These figures emerged from the lake at night, wandering the town. They appeared human but moved unnaturally, joints bending in impossible ways, heads tilting at inhuman angles. Their clothing was from various eras, always wet and decaying. Students said the Walking Ones appeared roughly once a week, though the timing was unpredictable. When they roamed, they moved through streets for hours, pausing at houses, peering in windows. Sometimes they vanished at a certain location. Other times they tried to enter homes. Locals had learned to keep doors locked and windows secured when the Walking Ones were near. I assumed it was teenage folklore, a ritual to frighten newcomers. But in late September, students reported an actual sighting. It emerged around 11 p.m., walked down Maple Avenue, paused at multiple houses, and lingered beneath my balcony for almost half an hour. My students were describing someone, or something, that had come to my home. That night, I locked every window, drew the curtains, turned on all the lights, and sat in my bedroom watching the darkness outside, questioning whether I was part of a collective delusion or facing something real. Over the following weeks, I became obsessed with the Walking Ones. I visited the town library and spoke with Marjorie. She confirmed everything. The Walking Ones had emerged from Raven Lake for as long as anyone could remember. The earliest mention was in 1947. A local newspaper reporting strange figures moving through the town at night, dismissed as a hoax. Marjorie then showed me a ledger maintained by the library, a record of missing persons from Ravenshore dating back to 1923. 53 residents had disappeared between then and the present, all during summer or autumn, all living within sight of the lake, all vanishing without explanation. Studying the ledger, I noticed a pattern. Disappearances occurred in clusters: 3 in 1923, none in 1924 to 25, 5 in 1926. The pattern suggested something cyclical, deliberate. Marjorie explained that townsfolk managed the Walking Ones by simply accepting them. Most never encountered them directly, but those who did noticed a purposefulness. They sought specific people in specific houses. When they found them, the individuals disappeared without struggle, without evidence. Authorities had investigated numerous times but found nothing. No bodies, no witnesses, nothing conclusive. The disappearances were eventually dismissed as voluntary relocations or suicides. But Marjorie's eyes told a different story. The Walking Ones were deliberate, and the people they found were taken, not gone by choice. Winter came. The lake froze, and the town felt temporarily safe. I began to settle in, enjoying teaching, making friends. Fear from autumn faded. But by mid-March, as the ice cracked and the lake thawed, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a single photograph of me on my balcony, wearing the dress I bought my first week. Taken from the street, it was unmistakably me. Across the bottom, in water-damaged ink, were words that froze my blood. "We see you. We are waiting. Spring brings hunger." I brought the photograph to Marjorie. She studied it silently before telling me the terrifying truth. The walking ones did not search randomly. They knew who lived where. They understood the town's geography, and sometimes they focused on one person or one house repeatedly. When that happened, disappearance was not a question of if, but when. I left Ravenshore that night. Packing hurriedly, I drove south toward Toronto, calling the school with a vague family emergency. I didn't stop until the city. But the photographs continued to arrive. 5 have come since I fled. Each shows me in a different location, unaware, captured from impossible angles, each with the same chilling message: we are waiting. We remember. We will find you. The most recent arrived 3 days ago, showing me in my Toronto kitchen, photographed from directly behind my shoulder as I made tea. I heard nothing, saw no one. Last night, I locked every window, drew all curtains, turned on every light, and sat in my bedroom listening to the city, knowing that something from the frozen depths of Raven Lake had followed me, something that had learned my location, was waiting for a single mistake, something hungry, and it remembered my name. My name is Evan, and I've been working at the grain elevator in Ridgeford, Manitoba for 16 years. Ridgeford is one of those isolated farming towns lost in the middle of the prairie, about 140 kilometers from the nearest real city. Around 850 people live here, most of them farmers, or tied somehow to the agriculture business. The land around Ridgeford is as flat as a sheet of paper. Wheat fields run straight to the horizon in every direction. No hills, no forests, just wide open prairie, an ocean of gold rolling beneath a sky that always feels too big. The grain elevator where I work climbs 230 feet into all that emptiness. It's where every surrounding farm brings its wheat and canola before we ship it east by rail. My job covers a bit of everything: monitoring the storage systems, keeping inventory straight, managing the loading and unloading. After 16 years, I know that facility like my own home. I could walk it blindfolded. I've crossed those fields hundreds of times. I know every dip, every rut in the ground. But in October of 2013, something in those fields changed. One evening, during a routine inventory check, I noticed something out in the western field beside the elevator. It was around 7. The sun had just slipped away, and dusk was thickening over the prairie. I was finishing my last walkthrough of the storage tanks when I saw them, lights hovering in a fixed pattern out in the field. They were about half a mile away, completely still, not moving, not flickering, not pulsing, just holding their place, giving off this soft, steady glow that didn't match any farm equipment or vehicle I'd ever seen. I reported it to my supervisor, a guy named Mark who'd been working there for 23 years. He brushed it off immediately, said it was probably a truck light or a flashlight from one of the neighboring farms. Told me not to worry about things outside my job description, so I let it go, out loud. But my mind, it wouldn't leave it alone. That night, I drove out to the western field myself. Nothing. Not a tire track, not a footprint, no tools, no machines, no sign that anyone had been out there at all. The field was untouched. October bled into November, and soon it was October 12th. I was on the evening shift. Around 9, I saw the lights again, in the exact same spot. Exactly the same color, same stillness, same eerie feeling that made the back of my neck tighten. This time, I went in deeper. I walked out into the field toward the lights, and before I even got close, something made me stop dead in my tracks. The wheat wasn't just knocked down, it had been arranged, flattened into a pattern, a deliberate engineered geometric formation you'd only be able to fully see from above. It was massive, 300 feet across. Concentric rings, symmetrical shapes radiating outward with impossible precision. As I approached, the lights blinked out instantly. Gone. No fade, no movement, just gone. I spent almost an hour in that field, circling the design. The wheat was pressed down perfectly, but not broken, not trampled like someone had walked through it. More like something heavy had moved above it and forced it flat without crushing it. Every circle measured exact, every angle perfect. No machinery, no person could have done that. Not out here. I reported it to the local RCMP. The officer barely pretended to care, asked if I'd been drinking. Suggested it was weather damage. He didn't file anything, just wrote me off. But I couldn't shake it. So I started documenting. I kept a journal, bought cameras, set one up on the elevator roof aimed at the western field. On October 12th, 2014, exactly 1 year later, the lights returned. Same spot, same formation. But this time, I recorded everything. They hovered for 3 hours. When they vanished, I went out again the next morning. Another circle. Even bigger. 7 concentric rings lined with symbols I didn't recognize. Patterns inside patterns. I threw myself into figuring it out. I studied crop circles across the continent. Most were hoaxes, but not all. A few had anomalies no hoaxer could replicate. Eventually, I found a crop circle researcher, Dr. Leanne Moss from British Columbia. I sent her photos. She replied quickly. She told me what I had found wasn't typical. The precision, the geometry, the electromagnetic interference in the soil samples, she said no human could reproduce those conditions. And then she told me something else. Crop circles appear in clusters, patterns, nodes. Certain areas draw them repeatedly. Ridgeford, Manitoba was one of those places. Records showed sightings going back to at least 1952. Every 13 years, something appeared near Ridgeford. 2001, 1988. Before that, 1975. And now, me. When I asked what she thought caused them, she hesitated, said she had theories, communications, markers, something intelligent, something with technology beyond what we know. She said governments studied crop circles quietly, secretly. I didn't know what to make of that. 2014 slipped into 2015, and on October 12th again, the lights came back, a perfect 3-year chain. I recorded it all. Another circle, larger, sharper, mathematically impossible. But in 2015, the pattern changed. Animals started reacting. Cattle refused to go near the western field. Birds avoided it. My electronics began glitching, camera faults, equipment failures, my watch speeding up, slowing down. Even my truck's wiring went haywire. It was like something in the field was disrupting anything with a circuit. Then October of 2016 arrived, and everything escalated. That night, the lights appeared again. I recorded the first hour watching from the control room window, but this time the lights stayed for nearly 6 hours. And something else happened. Something I still don't have words for. I felt a presence, not a physical one. Something inside my mind, something aware of me, like a consciousness leaning into mine and rifling through my thoughts, studying me, measuring me, judging me based on rules I couldn't understand. For 30 minutes, I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stood there while something examined me from the inside. Then it stopped. I came back to myself and realized 8 hours had passed. My watch said 6 in the morning. I didn't remember any of it. I had no idea how I remained upright so long. The camera had stopped recording at the exact moment the presence hit me. Doctors found nothing wrong, perfect health, perfect vitals, perfect imaging, but 8 hours of my life were gone. Dr. Moss told me this was something called missing time, a known pattern in anomalous encounters. She urged me to leave Ridgeford, said the phenomenon was escalating. I stayed. 2017 came. October 12th again. This time I had better equipment, spectrum recorders, insulated cameras, everything I could think of. And I saw something that shattered everything I believed about the world. The lights didn't appear above the ground. They came from beneath it. They rose up slowly, lifting through the soil like the earth wasn't solid at all. As they rose higher, a shape emerged, geometric, immense. It climbed 300 feet into the air above the field, hung there for about 4 minutes, then descended straight back into the ground. I've told no one except Dr. Moss. I've kept watching the field every October 12th since 2013. The lights return every year. The patterns in the wheat appear every year. And every year, that presence comes back, that intelligence, that awareness, examining my thoughts like it has a right to them. 2 months ago, I received a package, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me standing in the western field, wearing clothes I've never owned. The angle was from high above, as if someone had taken it from hundreds of feet in the air. I looked calm in the photo, peaceful, smiling, a version of me I don't recognize. Behind me, in the distance, was the shape, the same vast form I saw rise from the earth in 2017. On the back, in careful handwriting, were 4 words, "You have been chosen." October 12th is close now, and whoever sent that message ended it with, "We are waiting. You will understand soon." I don't know what I've been chosen for. I don't know what's going to happen this year. But I know I'll be in the control room again, watching the field, feeling that presence slip into my mind. And this time, I'm not sure I'll come back the same. Maybe I won't come back at all. The pattern in the wheat isn't a message, it's a marker, a summons, and I'm terrified that I'm the one being called.